Hi, everyone. I would like to introduce you to Rick Bruner, the next moderator, CEO and founder, Central Control US, and Vice Chair at ICOM.
Hello, hello. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Am I on?
I guess so. Go ahead, Rick. It's with you. Go ahead.
Fantastic. I'm just going to shift my view here so I can see everybody. Welcome. Thank you. So yes, I am the vice chair of ICOM for the US and also the co-chair of the Incrementality Council. So this is very apropos. I also, I don't know if Amaya Lassa is in the audience. I haven't run into her the whole time, but if she's not, I believe I hold the record for the most number of summits attended other than Andreas and Shokat themselves. It's probably number 9. I think everyone on the Iberian Peninsula, and then this really tremendous global event that we've done today. And I'm also CEO of Central Control, which focuses specifically on running experiments. Control is a pun on control group. And I'm very pleased to have a fantastic group of speakers to join us today, representing 3 brands and 2 major media companies. My first question is going to be to have them each introduce themselves and say a few words about their practices on this topic of incrementality. But I just want to take a moment at the top to, kind of set the agenda for the conversation, as it were, and start with some definitions around this whole topic of incrementality. We created a new category in the Data Creativity Awards this year. We did it so late, we didn't get a lot of entries, and so it wasn't much represented. But we had a big discussion ahead of it about incrementality, and we made a distinction between incrementality inference and incrementality experiments. And I would like to lean into that part of the distinction of this topic in our conversation today. And just, without going on and on, briefly, Andy did a great job, and the presenters in the previous panel did a great job talking about, incrementality being the intent to try to isolate what is that baseline of, presuming we're talking about purchasing behavior, of that purchasing behavior in a target audience that is going to happen anyway, and then what is the incremental effect on that audience of that campaign that the advertising media spend has. That's the question that we're trying to answer, and there are different ways to attempt to answer it. Some measurement models rather ignore that question in ROI, and you get a lot of over-crediting of media when you ignore that. But then there are different ways to try to measure or estimate that increment. And we've heard, and that's this distinction between inference and experiments that I wanted to make, where it's rather accepted science that the best evidence comes from experiments, and particularly a type of experiment called a randomized controlled trial. But it's not always practical in every case to execute those. And also they're hard to execute, and they can be noisy and introduce inaccuracies themselves. But it's different than analytical, statistical, inference, correlation, regression based, whether that's with AI, machine learning. If there wasn't an experiment set up that was going to intervene in the delivery of the campaign to create something to measure against. It's a different classification, I would say. And then, there are different types of experiments with control groups, without control groups. There's, a pause test, turn off all your advertising for a month and see what it does to your sales. That's an experiment, like dropping a Mentos in a Coke bottle. It's a before and after. But because it's not as clear as a geyser of soda, most cases, there are other things that can happen in that period of time that might account for the differences in sales. It's a less powerful experiment than a control group experiment. Geo-tests are a kind of experiment of, sometimes city level, DMA, metro area, sometimes zip code Those would be described as different units of an experiment. They come with pluses and minuses as well. And then there are user level experiments. And user is a little hazy term, as we all know. You talk about cookies, you talk about households, you talk about logins, email addresses. I could get into more technical detail, but with that, I just kind of wanted to level set. And I think we're going to be talking, we hear synthetic controls and other kinds of terms. It's more of an inference-based approach. And if we're really talking about experiments, it's another kind of analysis. But I think our panelists are going to be familiar with the range of those different types of incrementality approaches, and we'd like to hear about all of them. And so with that, let me invite each of you to just speak, introduce yourselves, obviously, where you are, your name, your company, and a bit about your company's journey in this kind of analytics. And I'm going to have Baptiste from Google go last and get into more detail about some specifics that Google obviously has a big impact on a lot of our lives, is doing in this space. And why don't I start with one of our advertisers who I've met on a few occasions. He's been at ICOM previously, Dane Aronsen from Booking.com.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. I'm Dane Aronsen from Booking.com. My team of marketing scientists and I are tasked with the role of making sure all of our display and video advertising is measured experimentally, and that we have the best experimental designs we can possibly have across all of our advertising partners, and that the results that we measure are comparable across all those partners. So a lot of what Rick just described is exactly my day-to-day.
Great, and I know that you've been really deep in that for a long time. Terrific. How about Nathan at Wayfair?
Sure. My name's Nathan. I've been at Wayfair for about 4 years. I'm an associate director on our data science team, in particular, the marketing attribution portion of our data science team. That would fall into the category of inference in Rick's division of these types of incrementality. But I partner really closely with our measurement team that is doing the actual experimental studies. And in the past, I've actually run some of those studies. So we do think a lot about the relationship between the experimental portion of truly measuring incrementality and the inference for day-to-day operations.
Terrific. How about one of our media representatives, my friend Gaurav Shirole at Roku?
Sure, thanks, Rick. Hey, I'm Gaurav Shirole, based out of New York City. I lead the measurement and attribution team at Roku, and we're really focused on kind of supporting our partners however they want to measure their media, although causal measurement is near and dear to my heart. And I think something that's really interesting to comment a little bit on our organization's incrementality journey is CTV by definition can serve individual device impressions. So randomization, when we talk a little bit at what unit level it's available, given a direct consumer relationship and an ability to dynamically insert ads on a big TV screen, it's exciting to be able to support kind of randomized controlled trials on a TV. And the one other piece to that story that I look forward to talking about a little bit is Roku's actually in about 1 in 3 smart TVs sold in the US. So another component to incrementality is omnichannel incrementality. If you can do incrementality on one platform, what about exposures on other platforms? So the ability to combine linear ad exposure and then randomize a streaming experiment on top of that is something else that's interesting and exciting, specifically as I think about our organization's sort of commitment to causal measurement.
That's great, thanks. And I just had the pleasure to meet Daniel Allen from Kimberly-Clark a bit earlier, product category that we know is going to be in demand in the coming days and weeks. Daniel?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Rick, and hello, everybody. It's really exciting to be here. So my name is Daniel Allen. I lead global data analytics and innovation at Kimberly-Clark. And so I am responsible for a few different things, predominantly driving clarity to marketing performance at scale is a big part of what I'm focused on. Also, there's a focus that I have in advancing our capability set to really unlock the power of prediction for us as a CPG company. And so that includes advancing data analytics platforms, partnerships, products that we invest in across different suppliers and internally as well. So really exciting to be here. In this and the last several roles that I've had, I've worked with different types of incrementality tests and approaches, from random and stratified random test and control experiments, time series, match markets, things like that. Really focused in the marketing, media, and creative space. As I think about the roles I've had, kind of that bridge that, there's been a focus on MarTech capability building, data strategy, as well as data science roles as well. So really excited to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you. Excited to have all of you. And finally, from Google, Baptiste, I'm going to invite you to spend a little bit more time, if you can keep it to about 5 minutes, but give us an overview of some of, obviously we know that, Google is joined forces with other forces in the industry to sunset cookies, but has really, kind of set the deadline on it. And so we're looking forward to future ways to continue to account with the help of the major partner that you are to so many marketers. So we'd like to hear, and I know your responsibilities, particularly in Europe, but perhaps some of what you're speaking about also has global implications. But please give us an overview of what's going on with you guys in this realm.
Thank you, Rick. What an introduction. Thanks a lot. I'm very happy to be here. So my name is Baptiste. I'm ad effectiveness specialist for Southern Europe at Google. I've now been working since like 15 years on the research field and almost 10 years in the ad effectiveness field. And what I wanted to take you through today is a journey I lived since I've joined Google like 3.5 years ago, and how it evolved regarding our measurement strategy, and mostly the third-party measurement strategy, which is an important point to highlight. And it started so 3.5 years ago, and I think regarding the cookieless world, it was not clearly an objective to develop third-party solutions in a cookieless world, but it was more like a side initiative because we never want to put all your eggs in the same bucket, in the same, I don't know the real expression in English. But yeah, so we have many different opportunities, many different initiatives, but I want to talk about the one I've been doing in Europe. So the first thing we've done and we've worked on is to take the old-fashioned methodologies and try to make them better, because MTA was in a difficult situation already, and we thought, okay, maybe the first thing is to try to maybe not replace, but do marketing mix model better versus what it used to be. So we launched this program in Europe to provide more granular data to vendors that are running MMM, training them on understanding what are the different formats in the digital world, what are the different targeting strategy, the different devices, and understand better the whole ecosystem, to invite them to split better all the media they were including in their models, and not just having the digital in one single bucket, but also having YouTube versus other online video versus TV versus press, and etc. And providing data to them was obviously a big step for that. Then we are trying also to promote different ways of using MMM, like doing cascade model, which allows to include upper funnel KPIs in the model. We invite also clients that have access to loyalty cards to try to model, per specific client segment. So you can do MMM on specific segment of consumers if you have access to this kind of data. We also try to promote very specific geographic MMM or store level MMM for also retailer, which allows to better understand, local campaigns and local media, which is very important for stores and retailers. And last but not least, we are also trying to improve some of the pieces of the methodology of MMM, like including long-term effect, which is very important for a lot of media. And obviously for us also, because digital is not just performance, it's also branding. So we try to promote that. And the second methodology we are using alongside MMM is GeoExperiment. We are also doing a lot of effort to have a very strong methodology on that, ensuring we have comparable things to evaluate. We work with the best vendor for that, which are Nielsen, ROI, or NPD. They obviously have access to the whole data for that. So it's really great to have this kind of A/B testing with a very controlled experiment and control environment. And we are now even launching new approach with Ipsos with the use of our own GeoExperiment tool, which is actually open source. So Ipsos can develop this same methodology for any client that would like to share their data, their sales data and retail data to them. So they can actually do the store matching and do the A/B testing on the GeoExperiment. It's a very interesting move. So that was not the past, this is the actual, and now we're moving forward to different things. So we are testing user lift, for example, thanks to a great partnership with LiveRamp, where we try to match Google data with loyalty card holders. And combining that, we are able to also do test and learn and some kind of A/B testing, but at a much specific, more specific level. So the user level allows us to really understand who saw the advertisement and then who bought and what. So we are in the middle of testing these kind of solutions. We are also embedding in the world of attribution to use more conversion modeling that relies a lot on machine learning, but also on a strong tagging strategy. Without cookie, tagging is one of the only solutions to actually have access to data. And then the two last initiatives we are doing that are really interesting and we are starting to test it. It's a new environment we're trying to create to actually help our vendors and our clients to have access to more information. So the first one is Ads Data Hub, which is a safe environment where we put available all the Google Ads data to our clients so they can actually match it to their own, and they can use that as a safe and private environment. And then we give them access to this information with aggregated data of 50 users. So it's not cookie level, it's aggregated information of small groups with specific behaviors based under some condition that the client could put. And then it allows you to optimize your reach or optimize your frequency and so on. And the last initiative I wanted to share is the last announcement we've done. It's the Privacy Sandbox, which is a new way of collaborating, I would say. It's very new to Google. We do that a lot in the engineering side, but not so much in terms of data and measurement. But we basically make available in a very safe environment different kind of technical tools. So people, anybody, could actually test things into that sandbox to answer specific questions regarding measurement, regarding targeting, and so on. And we hope that thanks to that, people will challenge status quos and also find new ways to unlock additional solutions to measure incrementality and other stuff in the cookieless world. So yeah, basically as a conclusion, we're trying to do a lot of efforts. There's no one size fits all solution. All that has to be somehow combined to have the best solution. And we do our best to make that available to our client, and hopefully they see an added value into that.
Excellent. Great. Very interesting stuff. Yeah, some of that I'm familiar with, but there's a lot more to learn. You know, the sandboxes in particular is something I'm interested to learn more about. But let me turn to, you know, one of the two questions that frames the title of the conversation, which is COVID, incrementality in a COVID, world. And a thesis of mine, and something I've been talking with other people about, you know, this practice of experiments and movement of incrementality is not new in the advertising world and even in the digital advertising world, but it seems in the past few years that there's been more focus on the practice, and it's been, there was ghost ads as a technology approach to running experiments by media companies that has been adopted by Google and by Facebook and Roku and others that has had some impact on this practice. And, it's a growing conversation. It has been already. The technologies and techniques have gotten better in recent years. So more advertisers are interested in adopting more of these sophisticated kinds of experimental measurement approaches. And I'm wondering if COVID, as we hear it accelerating all trends or many trends, if this is one, in terms of a huge disruption in the economy, disruption in consumer buying behaviors, in media consumption behaviors, and in how advertisers have been investing their money this year compared to years prior, making things like mixed models, long-term longitudinal analytics, more challenging when trends are so different this year. And marketing budgets being on the defense, having been scaled back in many cases and are building themselves back up. And given that there's this foundation now of knowledge and practice and technology around experiments, coupled with the cookies going away, is this a moment where more advertisers are going to gravitate more quickly and eagerly to these kind of tactics? Or not? Maybe there's just so much else going on that it's still going to get lost in the shuffle. And let me throw that first to Gaurav, because aside from Baptiste, you're the one who has the experience of seeing a lot of advertisers. And I know you're fairly new to your role, less than a year, but you come out of a background also of other companies in the space doing, television related advertising experiments. What is your just thought to that premise?
Well, COVID certainly required marketers to respond. And I think, as a platform, it was really important to offer folks agility, control, value, but it was also a reminder to the measurement folks that there's so much else that goes into all of this. You need advertisers need to worry about their creative traffic. That was a big change early on, which is sort of kind of balanced out. But in general, businesses are adapting, and we need to be able to allow them a little bit more precision. For example, in the CPG space, product inventory was an issue rather than anything to do with advertising. So it was just a kind of reminder of a lot of these various factors. But from the kind of Roku perspective, we entered 2020 planning on it to be the streaming decade. And what we really saw over the course of the pandemic was an acceleration in streaming. So we ended as of Q3, we added 2.9 million active accounts, 46 million accounts globally as sort of streaming ticked up. And that selfishly, as a measurement person, means that our end sizes are growing. And so on the one hand, the marketers are facing a variety of complicated restrictions, whether it's product availability, creative, and so on, but they want to be able to make sure their investment is working. So measurement is more important than ever for them, especially causal measurement for those of them that are sort of eager to invest in that. And then on the other hand, we've kind of got scale and especially in the TV world, the ability to adapt. The shift we saw in the upfronts, moving from broadcast upfronts to calendar upfronts and that kind of thing, really emphasized kind of the need to be able to shift things around. I guess at the kind of takeaway has really been acceleration of trends we saw coming in some ways, and sometimes it at least surfaced the ability to do things that people couldn't execute on because of some of the other blockers, but that just means the goals are more ambitious in 2021. So I think kind of working across advertisers, we saw some folks that were able to move quickly and lean in, other folks that need a little bit more time, but are kind of being pushed out of the nest to take advantage of some of the more sophisticated incrementality solutions as they have to prove their ROI in this environment.
That's interesting. Daniel, how about from your standpoint? I've forgotten how you told me about how long you've been there, but I know you had experience elsewhere where you've done more and less experimentation-based approaches in different roles. But what's your reaction just to that premise? And
yeah, so I've been at Kimberly-Clark for a little over a year and a half now. And you referenced it in the introduction that when COVID hit, I mean, a lot of our products became front page news, and we found ourselves in the headlines, and kind of trends were underway in a lot of ways to what Baptiste and Gaurav were referencing before. But the a lot of what you said, that COVID in a lot of ways was accelerating things we were trying to do from a measurement perspective and from an overall kind of digital transformation perspective. I'll just say that when COVID hit from a Kimberly-Clark perspective, I mean, there were definitely 4 key priorities, which kind of in some ways outside of measurement were really to focus on keeping our employees safe, focusing on what our customers need, what our consumers need, and then focusing on the role that we can have across our communities as well. The focus on taking care of the supply chain across that, and then what does that mean in terms of optimization of that, and where do analytics plug into making sense out of that. I'll say that from a consumer perspective, we were to the point of acceleration. We were moving forward with more of those direct or focusing on the role that e-commerce was playing. We had a buy now button up on our website within 4 days after COVID hit, and then also from our perspective, making sure that we have the balance of that with the relationships that we have with our channels and our supply chain across the globe as well. If you look at that focus on continuing to be consumer centric, prior to COVID, a lot of our consumers that were doing business in e-commerce were younger, they were employed, tended to be more wealthy. The basket size tended to be smaller. But COVID really accelerated the breadth of different types of consumers that were interacting in the e-com environment, where you start to see broader audiences, older audiences, different employment statuses. You would see the basket size starting to increase in the e-commerce space. So new consumers are entering, and our focus is increasingly with that becoming more and more consumer centric. And so what does that mean in terms of personalizing consumer experiences, running proper experiments that help us implement things like creative A/B testing, different types of audiences that we want to understand lift from. So again, as you think about what the role that COVID had in things like the restaurant business, where they were talking likely about curbside pickup, right, prior to COVID, but what happened, I got curbside pickup at a restaurant last night, and it just really accelerated the model, as well as the ease of transaction, the frictionless transaction in that space as well. So for us, again, as a CPG manufacturer, where the traditional way that we do business is through our brick and mortar channels, and obviously that's been changing over the years. Understanding what the role of that is, what it means to continue to be consumer centric, and how our analytics and measurement strategies align to that overall evolution.
That's great. So Dane and Nathan, I want to give you both the chance to weigh in on this. I know that you, both of your companies have been practicing this kind of experiment-led ROI analytics for advertising for several years. I recognize your company as this kind of at the leadership realm of this. I know a lot of companies still have trouble. I think we heard it in the previous panel, like, first of all, just appreciating what is important here, in terms of, qualitative differences and different ways to measure, let's say. But you know, and so it's organization. There's often a lot of organizational resistance. You know, sometimes these kind of tests will, you know, contradict other ways of analyzing, you know, like MTA, last click kind of analytics, quite dramatically. And that may come with friction as to somebody who controls a budget, who doesn't want to be told their baby is ugly, and so forth. And given that your firms are already very advanced at these kind of practices, I mean, is this moment, the premise of the question, you know, COVID accelerating the demand for this kind of measurement? Maybe, I don't know if that is relevant to you or not, or if you're still having those kind of internal struggles. That'd be interesting to hear about. So Dane, why don't you jump in first?
Yeah, sure. I mean, booking certainly, like, although we try to use that experimental approach whenever we can, we still have the sorts of conversations you're describing where spend is modeled out and people try to reach their targets in terms of advertising spend. And something like COVID hitting really showed us the importance of having real-time, experimentally controlled incremental results. So, you know, COVID hit us really hard in April and our bookings dropped by 95%. And our models were telling us, you know, May is a really good time to advertise to people because they're booking holidays for the summer. But our incrementality studies were telling us there's no point in advertising to people because they're just not going to book right now. And so having a strong incrementality setup actually helped us in getting our spend back on track faster, because we knew we could go to the finance team and say, I have proof here of top line growth for the business. I can invest this much if you're willing to back that. And so, yeah, I think a crisis that makes people worry a little bit more about how they're allocating their resources can really help, because that's what this does. Incrementality is all about finding the best place to allocate those resources.
That's great. Nathan, what's your thought there?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts there. So what you were describing in terms of internal negotiations, I would say that it's been a sort of a long process with lots of engagement between folks on measurement teams and data science and folks who are managing these on the ground marketing campaigns. It's been a process of years of developing the understanding and expertise within the organization to be able to move nimbly in a situation like COVID. And I can say a couple concrete changes that we observed. So we'll do both customer level testing and geo-based testing that other folks have described. And COVID really messed up the geo-based testing. So the fact that we had deep understanding of what methods were available to us allowed us to pivot from what was previously planned and dig in the places where we could get concrete answers. And as for us, we were still able to continue with our much of our planned marketing, but for companies who had to pull back, I do notice that there is an opportunity if you're relaunching now, which is, and especially if there's concern about spend. A lot of times marketing will have concern about suppressing marketing because then we're going to lose returns because we've suppressed a holdout. Right now, if companies are relaunching, it's sort of a natural opportunity to launch with a holdout. So you can be launching potentially with less spend. You're not losing any money, but if you do that in a test structure, you can get a read on what is my marketing performing like right now. So that is to some extent a unique opportunity of this situation right now.
Well, that's a great insight. Yeah, both of those. Terrific. So we've got just about 5 minutes left. Any of you who know me know that I could go on and on and on this topic, especially with folks as smart as these. But the other part of the title of the panel was about the post-cookie era. And I think it was, there was a cue in from the previous panel too about standards. What kind of standards, might apply in experiments? And, my business is all about running these experiments. I've thought a lot about this. And I'm curious what you guys think, but, I mentioned before units of experiment being in the case of a randomized control group audience experiment, the unit at which you separate the populations, that could be zip codes, that could be DMAs, that could be cookies, not for long, could be known logins at a Facebook or a Roku or a Google. It could be email addresses. A lot of people are talking about email addresses as being the next tangible thing, and so forth. IP addresses. There are various units out there for discussion. Who wants to raise their hand on that first? What do we think are going to be some of the ways to approach this that are going to maybe be scalable, in terms of standards and widely adopted?
I'm happy to take a bite at that, which is, I think, given that you all are practitioners of the quantitative science, maybe arts even sometimes, we're going to want the finest granularity available on each platform. And so I think what some of the innovation we might see around that is kind of how do you factorialize your design? And I've been on conversations before, Rick, with you and some of our colleagues around how to build an experiment across platforms. So I think I'm excited to see some of the innovation and possible partnerships on that side. Of course, speaking from the lens of a platform that has registration data on our users, for us, at Roku, the level of experimentation and targeting will be at an account and device level. But there's no doubt that folks are going to want to do matched market tests because they can't buy all of their media and they want their experiments to represent the type of media they can buy. So I think between platform partnerships and sort of some of the stuff we're starting to see come out, that'll be how we tackle it. But I'll go ahead and make the bold claim that as finely grained as we can get is how you all are, we all might approach this.
Yeah, I'll build on that. So again, for me, I think that it starts with the measurement being fit for the purpose that you're trying to achieve. And so therefore, to Gaurav's point, and in our case, the unit of experiment may be broader than the individual level or the actual person level, which could include market, it could include store, it could include, to Gaurav's point, an ID or device, really depending on what you're trying to achieve and how you're measuring outcomes. When it gets back down to the cookie going away, as we look at the investments in identity, I think that becomes more and more critical. A lot of the UDL providers that I'm seeing are really focusing or taking a hard look at the HEM or hashed email space as kind of a core seed for that profile. And then, using that as a way to bridge across the known and the unknown. In terms of how measurement will evolve, I mean, look, I still feel that marketing mix modeling in a traditional sense, with cookies going away, still has its place in that you can look at it across all of our advertising investments, including trade, including investments in media. Understanding that it's multivariate regression and some of the limitations of that in terms of how you get to a granular level. But then again, where are we thoughtful around the one-to-one types of investments that we make in the measurement space to optimize things like digital, or understanding the role that earned and owned channels have relative to paid, and how we orchestrate our media and our consumer touch points in the right way. And I guess the last thing I'll say that was also touched on in the panel discussion today is that I think that it'll be critically important for suppliers in the measurement space as well as in the publisher space to form those partnerships. I heard the topic of white room come up today, or sandbox come up today, but how are we more able to understand the relationships across those platforms and the impact that it's having, that our overall marketing investments are having on the bottom line and outcome.
Fantastic. And I just got the 2-minute warning. So Dane, you're in Europe, maybe, with the GDPR sensitivities, you have one way you think about these questions.
Yeah, I think Gaurav sort of touched on it. Essentially, the way we look at it, measurement for measurement's sake is great, but there's no real point in me knowing that my ROI in the UK is X. I need to know what I can do to improve that ROI in the market. And so for us, it makes the most sense to have some split by a targetable subgroup. So I can tell that it's better to advertise to people that want to travel internationally than domestically, or people that are in big cities than out in the country, something like that. So long as what we end up with is user groups that are targetable and I can segment my results in that way, then I'm happy. And I guess we've touched on a lot of ways to achieve that, but yeah, I mean, that's where the real value is.
Yeah, I agree with that. Nathan, do you have any thoughts on that?
So I think the point of understanding what question you're asking that Dane just described is really important, and that oftentimes when folks are heading into tests, they want to answer lots and lots of questions. So I liked Dane's framing of like picking, like, we probably want to know returns and then picking maybe one more or two more questions. Because if you ask too many at once, you don't get answers that make sense. So that's a nice actionable thing to think about in a situation like this.
That's great. Yeah, my own thought on the, what standards ought to be in terms of measurement is, I mean, I don't know how it would affect GDPR in Europe and so forth, but the email seems like it's on track to be a very, cross-platform metric. And I wish that zip codes, from a targeting standpoint by the media companies, took out geofencing. I don't care where somebody is at the moment, but if I could know the zip code that matches to their credit card bills, it would be a very powerful mechanism for experiments. Baptiste, I gave you 5 minutes at the start, but I'll give you I don't think we've heard from you again since, so I'll give you the closing words here. We haven't got the clock, but I'm expecting to see a countdown clock for a minute show up.
No, I'm going to be fast because I don't know what will happen in the future and what will be the key and ideal metrics we could use, but we have to remember that user privacy has to be at the center of our discussions, because without our users, we wouldn't have any business. So it's important to respect that. And I'm sure we'll find a good solution, and that every business, every client might have a different solution based on the kind of data quality they have, the granularity they have, and we might need to keep developing new things based on the specificities of each one.
That's great. Okay, I'm actually told we don't get our countdown clock. We're a minute over or something. So my deep thanks to all of you wonderful panelists, some great insights. And I just, I'm so happy for ICOM to have had so much success with this conference.